Well, joining me now to have a further look at today's papers is Jack Rowlett, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Morning, Jack.
Good morning.
Let's begin with a story on the front of the Times about mobile phones being banned in schools, something the government have been talking about for a while, but we're getting this new guidance today. What do you make of this?
Oh, I think it's such a silly policy from a government that has run out of ideas, to be frank. Most schools already have rules in place around the use of mobile phones, so it's not really doing anything that schools currently can't do. Um, we know that mobile phones can actually be used in lessons, and they can be used in ways that are helpful. Certainly, when I was at school, they used to have all sorts of kind of interactive teaching methods which would take advantage of mobile phones through sort of quizzes and other methods like that. I think it's a draconian policy, and it fails to prepare children for the real world where technology and smartphones are utterly ubiquitous. And if the job of school is to set children up for life, then I think we're doing them a complete disservice by creating this sort of bubble world where they're insulated from the reality of technology's role in society. And there's been a lot of greater talk about children and particularly teenagers' safety of late. I fail to see how it makes them safer not to have phones on them when they're going to school and at break time so that they can ring their parents if they get into trouble or if they're unsafe. So I think this is such a silly policy, and it doesn't get to the heart of the problem.
So what was it like when you were at school? And as you mentioned, you were of an age where you had mobile phones when you were at school. Did people use them in classrooms? Did people break the rules? Were the teachers able to tell people, no, put them away, and people listened?
I mean, look, as with any school rule, there were always people who were prepared to flout them. But broadly, there was a sort of culture of respect towards that rule. Sometimes people would break it, but then the teacher would tell them, put your phone away. And usually they would. I mean, maybe there are schools in some parts of the country where it can be harder to enforce the rules for whatever reason. But actually, that's a different problem if you're not able to enforce your school rules. And I don't see how a kind of mandate from government actually solves that. We want to be setting children up for the real world. We want to be equipping them with technological skills. Smartphones are ubiquitous. They're part of work. They're part of learning more broadly in life. If we're not incorporating that into children's educations, then we're failing them.
I get that, but I still don't understand why any child needs a phone in the classroom.
Well, if they're being used as part of the lesson plans. As I say, when I was at school, there was this thing called Kahoot, which was great fun, where you would have these sort of interactive quizzes where you would sort of solidify your learning by competing with your classmates. And everyone has a phone, so it was, and everyone knows how to use their own phone, and so it was so easy to set that up. You weren't having to deal with the awful IT systems that often don't work properly. And precisely because teenagers love their phones, it was a great way of kind of making it more fun for them, and therefore making that learning and that solidification of learning and those sort of revision methods more accessible. So I think whilst kids absolutely shouldn't be using their phones in the class for Snapchat and whatever, actually they can be used as part of the learning experience, and that's a good thing.
And that is an interesting point, actually, because a lot of schools will have issues with resources and maybe not having enough computers or laptops or iPads or whatever, but actually most kids these days have a computer in their pocket, so maybe there's a way of utilising that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important that we equip kids for the real world, and that we teach them in ways that they can relate to and ways that they find enjoyable, because actually that's the best way of solidifying learning. And then you also refer to the issue of resources as well. It's a great leveler if as many children as possible have access to these resources and can use them. And if every child has a phone, then that's a great building block for sort of that approach.
Let's talk about fox hunting, because Labour has come out and said it wants to close some of the loopholes around fox hunting. Obviously, it's been banned since, I think it was the mid-noughties, wasn't it, when the Blair government brought in the ban on fox hunting. But let's be honest, it is got around by a lot of people because you still have this so-called drag hunting that takes place. And now they're saying they want to close those loopholes. And interestingly, they say it's actually quite a popular policy even with rural voters. Do you think it's right that they're targeting fox hunting again?
Yeah, I do. So I grew up, spent large portions of my childhood in rural Somerset and rural Wales as well, and where fox hunting still goes on. And although technically it's banned and has been since the mid noughties, actually in reality we know that often the rules get ignored, and that harm comes to other forms of wildlife as a result of these drag hunting methods as well. So I think it absolutely is right that we take action on this, and that Labour is saying it's going to take action on it. I think sometimes rural parts of the country are sort of portrayed as sort of moral backwaters, but in actual fact, banning this type of thing is popular with lots of people in rural areas. They don't want to see the utter cruelty of foxes being torn apart, or flocks being damaged as a result of these hunts. So whilst it is tradition for some people, and it does elicit strong opinions, actually I think this is a popular measure. And I think Labour is absolutely right to move forward with it, and I don't think it will harm them too much in rural areas.
That's a really interesting point, actually. And Steve Reed, the Shadow Environment Secretary, makes that point in the Times today. He says, it can be easy to have a kind of snobbish metropolitan view of the countryside and assume that everyone there is, massively pro-hunting. But if you look at the data, he says actually about 3/4 of people in the countryside support closing these loopholes around fox hunting.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's something of an age divide as well, because I think if you talk to older people in the countryside, they're probably more in touch with those traditions, more reluctant to change them, less approving of the government or the Labour Party trying to step in that type of area. But if you talk to younger people, if you talk to sort of people under the age of 40 or so, then they're much more likely to oppose these sorts of fox hunting methods, because they just think they're cruel, as people do in most parts of the country.
Let's talk about one more story. This is a sweet story in the Times today. A golden doodle, which is a cross between a golden retriever and a poodle, is now the country's most sought-after dog breed. Are you a dog person, Jack? Do you have a favourite breed? Do you know anyone with a golden doodle? What do you make of this?
Well, I don't know anyone with a golden doodle, but I am 1,000% a dog person. Not lucky enough to be able to have a dog in the rental I currently live in, but we do have a family dog called Fern. She is a Cavachon, which is King Charles Cavalier crossed with a Bichon Frise.
Oh, nice.
And whilst I'm not sure if she's a Times Radio listener, I wouldn't want it getting back to her that I'd chosen any other breed as my favourite, so I will definitely go with the Cavachon this morning.
Do you know, it's funny, one of the best, I suppose it's a compliment, maybe it's a backhanded compliment that I get quite a lot, is people go, my dog loves listening to you. And you think, really? People go, oh, yeah, I put you on for the dog. So clearly there are lots of canine Times Radio listeners out there. Jack, always appreciate your time. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Jack Rowlett there, political commentator with Young Voices UK.